master's hand for twiddling the strings of moral right and wrong.
To me, it's a way of life.
This season, we will focus on the importance of the device attached to every hand. Welcome to the Shepherd's Cast. This content may not be suitable for some listeners. Good morning, good evening, and good night, my flock. Welcome to the Shepherd's Cast, the podcast where I write horror short stories and explain the inspiration for why I wrote them. On today's episode, we will be concluding Ring Around the Dandy, and thus concluding the first short story of this season of the podcast. Now, I know it's been a long one, and it's taken multiple months to get out, but I think that now that we are over the bridge of introduction to Vim and Dandy, I have a good understanding of what it's going to take to coordinate people and to get episodes out in a more appropriate time moving forward. With that being said, my intention is to finish the second game, which is called Hide the Kitten, by sometime later this week, which means that I will be filming next week, which means that I am aiming to get this episode out on Monday, the 10th of August. After which, I will be moving towards finally publishing Heaper. I think it's getting close to time to start the final edit and get that process rolling, which means that novel number 2 will be coming out very, very soon. Speaking of novels being out, if you haven't heard by now, I have a little book called Nightmares of a Shepherd. It is based off of the first season of this podcast. If you met me during the signing the other day at Barnes & Noble, thank you for your support, and thank you for coming to check out the podcast after meeting me. It was a very cool experience to finally be interacting with people I didn't know, strangers who were interested in my creative process and everything I had going. I met so many people over the weekend, and by the end, I really felt like I was doing it. I was going from nothing to something to strangers, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted this to be more than just people who knew me, and we're finally on a path to make that achievable. I know some of you out there are not people I know personally, but I have yet to meet you in person. Your presence here is also something crazy to me, and it is hard for me to wrap my head around. I'm just so extremely thankful for each and every one of you, and I'm especially thankful for those of you that did know me and stopped and saw me anyway at Barnes & Noble. Thank you for showing your support and coming out to see me. The result of all of that was that I did not stop talking to people pretty much the entire time I was there. After I settled in, the first half an hour, it seemed like we went from somebody I knew to someone I didn't know to someone I knew to someone I didn't know, talking to me nonstop, and it was such an amazing experience, and it makes me really look forward to upcoming events that I will be doing. That Barnes & Noble in State College on Benner Pike, go check them out. They're amazing. They want me to come back again, so when Heaper comes out, I do intend on going back, and I might even go back in sometime in the near future to promote Nightmares of a Shepherd even further. That's about all I had to say, so let's finish this bad boy off. Here's Ring Around the Dandy, Part 3. Ring Around the Dandy, Part 3. The Voice of Nicole by Jess Booher. The Voice of Banjamin by Kyle Hinton. The illusion faded, and the man behind the killer's mask sat in the rocking chair in the corner.
So, that's it?
Asked Nicole.
I'm done, right? I won your little game.
The man shrugged and twitched his face. He didn't like the way she phrased her sentence. You see, sweetheart, I didn't say you had to outlive the other contestants. I said you had to complete 3 rounds. She dropped her head.
Please, just let me go.
Let you go, darling. We're just getting started. The commercial break ended, and the 3rd round began without hesitation.
How could I let you go when it's time for the big game?
His voice was Vim's once more, but this time it boomed, like an announcer talking through a megaphone. This was accompanied by a stereotypical sports music introduction.
All year long, companies prepare for the big game. It's the only time of the year that people want to watch advertisements, which means the engagement meter is an extra hard to please. Also, we will have to make our wheel a little more thematic.
As the music played, the widgets within the wheel flipped to the other side. Each of the new products were placed on a background decorated to resemble a football field.
Oh, I almost forgot,
said Vim, as the vines around his head transformed into a football helmet. It sheltered his mouth entirely and made his eyes seem like they were looking from the shadows.
Football is about violence. It's about softcore war. That is because we wouldn't want people to die on camera.
He winked to the fans.
They would rather the players penalized for excessive violence. I prefer the opposite, I think. Why not make the penalties cause excessive violence?
He withdrew a yellow flag from seemingly nowhere and tossed it onto the field. It fluttered downward and touched the wheel's center. This caused every other widget to flip upside down.
Flag on the play,
yelled a sporty announcer from the unknown. The widgets flipped back over, their football field background replaced with the yellow one. Nicole surveyed it quickly, but the penalties listed on each one was merely a series of numbers. It was encrypted code that wasn't meant to be. Nicole knew this to be the case because when it showed up, the flower looked panicked. Then there was a flicker which removed the CGI from the beast for just a mere second. The entirety of the virtual reality lagged, giving the viewer from beyond a second to breathe. The whole thing happened so fast. The transition from dandy to two dead advertisement influencers happened in only 15 minutes. The reality buffered, then returned to normal, leaving the flower to smile nervously, to try to pretend that the mistake didn't bother him.
Sorry about that, buds and tulips. It seems there's a bit of bud decay.
The pun felt forced. No, it felt like the flower had perfectly rehearsed everything up to this point, and the mistake had nearly driven him mad. He was clearly flustered, unsure of what to say. He eventually decided to just continue with the game.
Spin the wheel, Nicole.
No.
She said, an unforced smirk on her face the first time since the game started.
Nicole, you wouldn't want a reminder of...
No!
This time, she yelled.
You hypocrite piece of shit. You stand there, hiding behind your mask, speaking rehearsed lines, and when you're forced to improvise, you fumble.
The pun was completely unintentional.
I think you should penalize yourself and try again. I think...
A flower wearing bandages and walking with a crutch walked in front of the sign, labeling technical difficulties. He coughed once. Sorry, boys and girls, it seems that our regularly scheduled program is experiencing some technical difficulties. The flower wiped a bead of sweat off of his head. He checked the thermometer in his mouth and then continued. I apologize for...
1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You don't get to cut my feet off that easily,
roared Vim.
This fucking forsaken computer belongs to me now, do you understand?
He was an inch from the camera, the steam from his anger fogging the lens of the viewer. Nicole was also no longer talking. Her mouth had been replaced with nothingness. She was furiously breathing in and out using only her nose and feeling the smooth piece of skin that replaced her mouth.
Nicole, spin the fucking wheel,
commanded Vim. She reached down, her shaking hand revealing the regret of her outburst, and spun the wheel.
Ring around the dandy. Here, the flower's shanty. Mouthless, toothless. Where will it land?
Nicole's head fell backward. She was staring at the ceiling in defeat. There was no product to advertise because of her spin. Written on the wheel was one of the many yellow punishments. This one indicated a severity of 5 yards, which in football standards is merely a small infraction, but Nicole had no idea how that translated in terms of torture.
Sorry, Nicole, it seems you've taken a 5-yard penalty.
What? What does that mean?
Her mouth returned and her hand was trembling, clutching both sides of the podium she was chained to.
Well, it means that you must enter a level 1 simulation.
He looked at her wrists, which caused the cuffs around them to release. On the pink wall behind her, the scrolling sign, as well as the scandalous photos, disappeared. A door opened in their place. It was an unmarked gray fire exit with a push bar extending across the width of its center. At first, Nicole wished to protest and demand an explanation, but she'd been playing this game for so long and knew the effort was wasted. She turned and pressed the handle, exiting the studio. She stepped into an empty room, and when the door closed behind her, there was darkness. Then, in the nothingness, a spotlight turned on, illuminating a chair dangling from a monorail in the ceiling. It was reminiscent of a roller coaster. However, the ride only allowed room for one rider. The ride immediately strapped down when she sat, causing her to jump for fear of another spa treatment. However, there was no immediate danger. The coaster simply started. Nicole wondered if it were one of those hypothetical death coasters that killed you with gravitational forces. But that wasn't the case either. The ride was more reminiscent of a children's ride that would take you through a factory on a tour. It took a turn down an unseen hallway before revealing a projection on an imaginary wall to her left. A documentary narrator echoed throughout the nothingness as a black and white image played. Dandy has always had history with football. In the black and white projection, Dandy was wearing a helmet and throwing a football downfield to parry the pitcher plant. During a commercial break in the big game in 2030, the corporation involved in creating the cartoon announced their full conversion to quantum computing. Perry caught the ball and spiked it into the end zone. Quantum computing, a technology heavily marketed at the time, was the beginning of the modern energy crisis. The coaster turned, revealing yet another projection. This one was on her right. On the wall, there was a landfill that stretched as far as the eye could see in every direction. That same voice continued the tour. This level of power consumption and rapid expansion has led to the pollution that plagues the western United States. According to the Agency of Quantum Conservation, the Earth will be enveloped in its own garbage by the year 2120. That's why in 2040, Dandy made a follow-up commercial during the big game to announce that the corporation was beginning to fund the ejector projects. The new commercial showed Dandy driving a dump truck. He approached a rocket, which caused the garbage to load itself into the rocket. Once the rocket achieved liftoff, Dandy placed his hand out the window and gave a massive thumbs up. Nicole was beyond confused. She saw the commercial for the ejector projects 2 years ago. She wondered what it had to do with Vim, or the point he was trying to make. More importantly, she wondered what the documentary had to do with her punishment. Then, ahead, a double door opened, a blinding white beam of light behind it. The rail seemed to continue onward through the opening, supported by nothing. As she entered the vibrantly lit tunnel, her eyes adjusted, revealing that she was in the center of a football pitch. All around her, mannequins sporting jerseys yelled from the stands. In addition, there was an entire defensive front of plastic figures in position for the next play to begin.
What the actual fuck is this?
Asked Nicole as she uncomfortably shifted in the ride. Vim sprang up from underneath the field wearing a black and white striped shirt and holding a whistle in his mouth.
You may perform well under pressure, but can you survive an onslaught of vicious defenders breathing down your stem?
What does this have to do with filming ads?
She tried to push the metal bar adhering her to her seat out of the way. It was not surprising to find it didn't move.
Nicole, this isn't about the ad. This is about making the punishment thematic.
He seemed to be absolutely thrilled with himself. He was a giddy child, excited by his own creation.
Have you ever taken a snap before?
What?
Before she could piece together what he meant, a football launcher extended upward from a hidden compartment in the field and flung a football directly at Nicole's chest. She unsurprisingly didn't catch it. It bounced off of her and landed on the ground. An angry robotic voice echoed in her ears, indicating that there was a fumble. To further enhance the urgency, the word fumble flashed in front of her eyes repeatedly in red. As soon as the ball was snapped, The mannequins had sprung into action. All 4 defensive linemen slowly ran toward her, flailing their limbs in unnatural directions. The 7 members of the secondary ran in numerous directions, seeking to quickly cover 5 targets that sprang up from under the turf. Each of the targets were labeled with a number of points. The 2 higher-valued targets, which were worth 7 points, seemed to attract 2 defenders, while the lower-pointed targets, which were worth 3 points, attracted only 1.
Oh, look, there's a fumble on the play,
announced Vim through an echoing microphone. He was doing his best to sound like an obnoxious sports broadcaster.
She better pick up the ball fast. Getting sacked is a lot more painful than she might think.
Luckily, they were moving slowly, allowing her to think. She looked around for some semblance of an objective. On the scoreboard, high above the field, she found her answer. The screen said, minor penalty, score needed 10, current score 0, plays remaining 3. The task was clear to her. She reached downward for the ball, expecting to be stopped by the contraption she was strapped to. But to her surprise, the thing leaned forward, allowing her to access the ball. As she tucked it to her chest, she wondered how she could throw the thing. It wasn't just a question of dynamics. She hadn't thrown a football in the past 15 years, and she'd never thrown a football seriously. It was always a thing she shared with her father, who desperately wanted a son. That was back before she understood how much she had disappointed him just by existing. A rude awakening came to her in the form of a mannequin arm striking her across the chin, spewing blood onto the turf. The defensive player had slowly closed the gap, causing what was undoubtedly a broken jaw. She couldn't help but think that making a commercial now would be impossible. However, that should have been the least of her worries. After being struck, the defender froze. She coughed up a spurt of blood, and Vim's voice echoed throughout the stadium.
That is a sack, flora and fauna of the audience, however. I must admit that the result of the injury is rather disappointing. Oh, what's this? Maybe, just maybe, her jaw is broken. That might make advertising a bit more difficult. What do you think, Nicole?
He walked up to her from the sideline and placed a microphone in front of her face. It resembled one of those useless interviews on the sideline during a football game, just like the coaches. Nicole had nothing valuable to say. All she was able to manage was a gurgle and a moan that sounded unhuman. The flower plowed on, just as the interviewers did during the actual games.
How does that make you feel?
Again, she groaned, her jaw offering nothing coherent.
Well, I believe that means it's time to update the scoreboard.
The words on the screen above the field updated. Minor penalty. Score needed 10. Current score -5. Plays remaining 2. Nicole, staring through a bloody eye, watched as the play reset. She prepared herself for the snap, which came to her just as forceful as the last time. Once again, she didn't catch it, and once again she leaned forward to find it on the ground. This time, however, the blood that had pooled in the back of her throat splattered onto the ball. It made it too slippery to grasp, and she began painting the ground with it in her dazed state. Again, the flailing pieces of plastic closed in. Adrenaline took over the last second. She picked up the ball and heaved it down the field, not even taking time to see where the targets were located.
Interception,
yelled Vim as the mannequin struck home again. This time, the arm of the defender collided simultaneously with the top of her head and her arm. She passed out from the blow, her head falling back into the cushion of the seat. Had it not been for the apparatus around her, she would have collided with the ground. The blow seemed to cave in the side of her head, leaving mush where her temple used to be. The eye that used to call that side of the face home drooped from a non-existent socket, almost getting caught in her mouth. Vim approached the camera, almost looking disappointed. It was like he wanted the game to keep going, like he had so much more planned. He took a moment to gather his thoughts before speaking.
It seems that Nicole has taken an unexpected exit. It's a shame. I thought she had a lot more fight in her. I thought she would have toughed it out, but I suppose...
He trailed off. All at once, the virtual reality turned off, revealing the masked killer standing in the warehouse in front of the 3 contestants tied to the chairs. The calm voice took over. Oh, she's still breathing. He stood, unsure of what to do with her. It was clear he hadn't considered contestants living, but unable to compete. Then there was rage. The man showed his true colors by flipping the dead contestants out of the chairs. The clatter of the steel chairs on concrete was more horrifying than any other noise the children had heard up to this point. "You can't be fucking serious," he yelled. I planned it all out, and you ruined this game, you fucking bitch. He slapped her unconscious body. You fucking slut. He slapped her again. Die or wake up, I don't care which. It just can't be inconclusive. There was a moment of near silence. The only noise was the killer's heaving chest. It was clear he was waiting for something to happen, for her to move, for her to be anything but in a coma. Nothing happened. The killer had to say something, but couldn't turn to face the camera. He was ashamed of his failure, and it was clear how meticulously psychotic the man was. Game over, he said, his voice cracking with rage. Interlude. Dandy Media, 5/10/2045. The world became chaos overnight. The streaming platforms and television channels debated whether quantum computation was a universal good or evil. They questioned the ethics of computers being able to tap into the synapses of children. Each flicker from that vintage television providing the tunnel to gaze through resulted in another story. The viewer at the end of that dark tunnel chose to surf through them.
Good evening, America. Deborah Withers, Channel 89 News. Tonight we talk about the possible end of the cartoon that has gifted our children with life lessons for over 40 years.
Welcome to what could possibly be the final moments of the life of the supercomputer homing the entity known as Dandy. I am Josh Benson from AI in America, and Taking the stage in a few moments is the man I, Peter Martin, interviewed a few weeks ago for Billionaires and Counting. That's right, Banjamin Golden, the man who bought the Dandy program nearly 20 years ago, is about to take the stage. The crowd was ravenous. It was an unordinary contrast compared to the normal Dandy fans. Normally, children shouted, holding their collectible Dandy cards up as the man gave speeches. Banjamin made it a point to always be present for DandyCon and make announcements about the upcoming changes on the following season. He was there for all of it. He announced the Dandy TCG, the Dandy restaurant change, the Dandy supercomputer, the Dandy construction company. All of it boomed, and if anyone ever said anything that painted the flower in a negative light, they were removed. He thought about all the voice actors and corporations he had cut ties with as he stared in the mirror. The press conference was being given in the stadium of the Philadelphia Weed Eaters, a football franchise started by him. The stage was placed on the field, so he was forced to prepare in a random bathroom off the side of one of the field entrances. Internally, he wanted nothing more than to fire whoever was in charge of the cleanliness of the place, but that would have to wait. Addressing the mass murder that happened on national television in front of a bunch of children was probably much more important.
Mr. Golden, they are ready for you,
said his assistant, a tan-skinned woman wearing a black suit.
Just give me a minute,
replied Banjamin. There was nothing kind behind those words, only sternness. Though he gave a friendly smile to all the consumers while on stage or in public, the man was not pleasant behind closed doors.
They're going to eat shit whether I feed it to them in 5 minutes or 5 hours, so tell them to fucking wait. There's a lot I need to say, and I have to pick how to say it carefully, or else the stock is going to dump even further than it already has.
He paused, waiting for his assistant to respond, but there was only silence.
Hello, Earth to Bell, do you understand what I'm...
As he turned around, he trailed off. Bell had already left. With 2 hands, he washed his face at the sink before him and stared at himself in the mirror. His green eyes had weathered due to many years of putting out metaphorical fires. At this point, the makeup barely hid the bags beneath them. He rubbed water on his face and rubbed the excess from his graying goatee and pounded his fists against the surface of the sink. The scene kept replaying in his head. Again and again he saw the flower looking directly into the camera, mocking the empire he had built with his own hands.
When I get my hands on you...
His hands clenched in rage as he stared at the bulging vein in his neck. In a previous life he was a man who dwelled in the gym, but those muscles had long faded. He remembered his neck veins bulging twice as far during that time, and discovered a bit of self-hatred in his reflection. With a red face and trembling hands, he reached over to a stack of towels left for the athletes and ripped one free. He dried his face and walked towards the exit. He took the stage a moment later, the hatred and anger disappearing the moment he stepped foot in front of the public. The crowd was indeed ravenous. They hissed their displeasure in his direction, something he was not normally prepared for.
Settle, everyone.
The microphone picked up his deep voice and echoed throughout the stadium. The crowd, all of them ripping pieces of Dandy memorabilia to shreds, continued to voice their opinions.
Dandy Media has this all under control. However, it appears that some of you don't understand that we had nothing to do with any of this.
This halted the mob for a moment. None of the blind sheep had considered that this was something external. They had expected excuses. They expected the man in front of them to give a half-hearted apology for their accidental glitch. They expected the man to explain that they were going to transition Dandy Vision into a horror experience.
Friends, I hate to tell you that what you saw was real. Those people's bodies, minus the woman named Nicole who was in a coma, are deceased. Whoever did this is a serial killer attacking Dandy Media directly.
He looked down and forced a fake tear to come to his eye.
I just can't believe that I have failed you all so greatly. I don't know what else we could have done to the man behind the mask to cause him to resent us so much, but I wish that I could take it back. I wish I could heal him and apologize for our mistakes.
The crowd was growing increasingly silent. The brainwashing the Dandy Media had perfected was sinking into them once more. And once more, they were blind sheep sobbing as a whole, sobbing as a flock.
I know you are all eager to voice your opinions, and some of you may even blame me, so I wish to give you some time to voice your opinions. Please form a line near one of the assistants and they will give you the chance to ask your questions.
For hours, he did so. Question after question, he answered. And with each one, the crowd began to melt further into the palm of his hand. The questions became so diluted that the reporters began to get bored. Most of the stations only highlighted the intermittent, important questions. "How did this happen?" asked a concerned parent.
The killer must have found a way to hack into the supercomputer, which was previously believed to be guarded by a foolproof security system. I assure you that the team in charge of running Dandy are on it.
"How do you expect to pay for the damages to the psyche of these children?" asked another.
I will personally be paying for hypnotism therapy and give a $50,000 stipend to those who were affected.
On and on the questions came, but never did he get stumped. Not until the night had started drawing to a close, and the big question came. Will you shut Dandy down, such that this killer does not do this again? How could someone ask something so obscene? Shutting Dandy down would cost millions, not to mention the viewer spike that occurred once the crazies of the world discovered live murder on television. The thought of losing that money angered him. Therefore, he made his closing remark.
Dandy will never be shut down. I assure you that the security team will handle it, and this will never happen again.
He left the podium and the stage and stared at the head of cybersecurity of Dandy Media. It was a woman by the name of Emra, a laid-back, tattoo-covered nerd with a lot of power.
Don't make me a fucking liar,
he said, his finger threatening to stab her. And welcome back. Thus concludes our commentary on advertisements in social media. The next episode, we will cover a one-part short story called Hide the Kitten, which will be a commentary on something else related to technology. I don't want to give much more than that for fear of spoilers, but I do want to talk about the future of this podcast, and this season specifically. You all just heard the voice of Kyle, who is absolutely amazing at this. I had a feeling that he would be a great addition when he was telling me about things that he's done with his degree and things that he's done with his own creative processes, which I will have him on at some point to talk about once he is ready. Just once I heard his voice, I was absolutely blown away. He brings a level of professionality to this that I want to make a standard here on the Shepherd's Cast. And I don't know if you guys can pick up a difference in the audio quality of this episode, but I have worked my butt off on editing this, which is part of the reason it is so late. I've really had to discover a new process for editing multiple people's voices, and I think I finally have something down to a science, and hopefully it does not take me as long in the future. Anyway, Kyle, if you're listening to this, you are very much appreciated. As for Nicole, aka Jess, she has been absolutely amazing at throwing me ideas as they come up in her mind, and absolutely amazing to work with in a podcast setting. I don't have any more insights on things in this episode other than I want to talk about the big game. I will keep referring to it as the big game. According to Marketing LTB, the big game averaged 127.7 million US viewers across TV Plus streaming. This is the largest audience for the big game so far. It also says that a 30-second ad spot cost about $8 million on average, and that equates to roughly $266,000 per second. The production costs for top-tier ad spots often add up to $1 to $5 million. All of that is just staggering. I really wanted to paint a picture of what the pinnacle of advertisements can be. And as for the ethics of that level of reachability, I think it is important to consider whether the advertisement is a universal good or universal bad. And I'm hoping that this story allows you to make that distinction for yourself. Again, everything on this season of the podcast is going to be a commentary on something. And I am intending on taking the stances of both extremes at once. Hence the Vim Dandy duality. The ethical and political conundrums that come from that are up for you to decide and is no reflection of my personal belief, which I intend to keep out of this podcast for the sake of having everyone still welcome to the flock. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. So, as always, may the flock disperse until we congregate again. Goodbye.